on the matter. Heart on the matter.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us for another episode of Heart of the Matter. We are your hosts, Marcus and Scott. This podcast takes a deep dive into the issues of a man's heart, and it is our sincere desire to present practical ways of being centered in all areas of our lives.
Today, we'll be talking about failures that we experienced in our lives. This is part 2 of Dear Younger Me. Regret and failure go hand in hand. If we're honest, we've all experienced failure at some point. The real issues are the feelings we experience from failure, how we turn a failure from a negative to a positive, and how not to self-sabotage yourself. So let's get to the heart of the matter.
Let's get to the heart of the matter.
You know, there's been many failures in my life. Just as we're talking to the people, I bet there's been failures in your life just as well. Failure is something that we all experience. And it's how that we deal with that failure is how we come out on the other side. You know, one of my biggest failures in life would definitely be not using the time that I had effectively. You know, for many years of my life, I didn't really start living a good life until I was about 30. My whole 20s were about some foolishness. And if I knew now what I knew then, I could have established so much from 20 to 30. And instead, I squandered it. I used it as just a time to do whatever I thought was right.
I wonder how many people have that same testimony, though, and how that really may not be as off as you think that it is. The 20s should be those years of preparation. I remember hearing my mother say, and she says that she got it from her mother, and if you probably talk to my grandmother, she probably say she got it from her mother. But they would often say that you don't get any sense until you're 30 years old. And I think that life, as you deal with it, you just start to see things differently from a different perspective. I can kind of hear biblically Paul saying, when I was a child, I thought as a child. I spoke as a child. It's because I understood as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. And I think that when through either exposure and experience, you've heard me say this before, you tend to look at things differently. So in your 20s, what may have seemed fun, and if we go back and really look at it, it probably was fun in the moment. But in hindsight, looking back at it, now you're looking at it like, I was just wasting time.
Yes.
I don't know if you remember in elementary school, I would assume they did it where you were as well, but you would get your number grade for whatever it was, and then you would have like a conduct grade, like E, S, N, and U, right? And then one of them was does not use time wisely. I was thinking about that when you were saying that. I got plenty of those.
I don't remember it, but I guarantee you I got a lot of them. That was who I was.
I got plenty of Marcus does not use time wisely. And yeah, you find yourself spinning your wheels in places where you may be busy. There's a lot of energy being put out, but you're not going anywhere.
And you know, when you look back at it, when I think about the time that was really lost, because you can't ever gain that ground back. You can do better, but you can't ever get that time back. That time was spent in whatever you were doing.
So it makes this time more valuable.
It does.
So no, you can't go back into your past and reclaim that time. That time is spent. We can't get back to the opening of this podcast. So we have to take from where we are now because of what we've been exposed to and what we've experienced and say, hey, I could now use this time much better than I did then and still produce a wonderful outcome.
And a lot of it, when I look, like I said, when I look back at it, and there's a thousand things that contributed to me not using time wisely. You can find any situation and look at it and say, well, that happened there. But one thing for me was seriously alcohol. It was something that it really took a hold on me. And, I started drinking at a young age, 13 or 14. And at that time in my life, never did I think, man, this is going to control you at some point. I thought, man, this is going to be a good time. Oh, and when I first tried it, I was like, oh, this is, sneaking.
Sneak, yeah,
I
what
get
you can get away with.
what I can get away with. And it was fun. It was more, oh, this is exciting. Little did I know that one day it would seem like alcohol would control my life. And I'm sure that many people out there feel the same way, that alcohol controls you. It may not seem like it is right now. Let a hard situation in your life come up, and that's the real test, because it feels like it's a false escape. It's a way to deal with emotions and feelings that you don't want to deal with. So you start, okay, well, I'll drink and I ain't feeling that today. You'll feel them when you wake up in the morning with a headache. You'll have those feelings with a headache. And I mean, it had got to a point for me, and I don't even know if I've ever told you this story, where I mean, I had gotten to a point where I woke up on the steps of a bar. I had drank on it and had drank so much that I just walked outside and went to sleep. And I realized at that point, I come to my senses. I said, man, there is something seriously wrong and you need some intervention. And I think at that point, it wasn't that day that I decided, hey, I'm going to stop drinking. It wasn't that day. I still went out. And I think at some point it turned from just not to being the drinking to also the party scene. It was the excitement. I enjoyed the atmosphere of the party scene. Drinking was just another part of it. And as I got older, I would drink to hide feelings. When I started, when I was drinking when I was very young, I never knew, hey, you're doing this to try to mask these feelings and this hurt that you've had in your life. And I think a lot of us do that.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, it's a coping mechanism. And
Absolutely.
whether it's alcohol or, which in my opinion is a drug, but there are other drugs that people find themselves running to cope. And just as you said, you're looking for a place of comfort. You're looking for a place to hide from whatever the current situation is. And it may not be alcohol for you. It may not be drugs. It may be trying to find validation or affirmation in someone else. I think that's maybe the underlying issue for me. I did alcohol probably for someone who's really had a drug problem. You don't see marijuana as like a drug, but I remember me and Mary Jane had a very close relationship for a long time. Um, but those really weren't my things. I think my addiction came in another way of finding comfort with different women. And it's something that I struggled with for a long time. And if I'm being honest, I would still struggle with, but you come to this place, like you said, you look back and you're like, I've got to do something different. For me, I see it as being self-destructive.
That's exactly where it takes you, to destruction.
Yes. So if it's on the very ground level self-destructive, why would I keep tearing myself down? And that's before I even begin to realize how it will affect those closest to me, my wife, my children, whoever. As a leader, it's bigger than just me. So I can't say that I want to grow and I want to be the best version of myself if I continue to tear myself down.
Because that was one thing for me. I was getting ready to be married, and I was thinking in my head, man, I'm living a destructive life. There is no way that my marriage is going to last with the way I'm living my life, because there's nobody going to put up with you being out all night, hanging out at places. And I was like, man, I've got to do something. And it was just it was really a wake up call for me.
So you were saying someone else putting up with your behavior. I keep hearing though that you get to this place where the first person who's not going to put up with your behavior has to be you.
Yes, that's the only way you're going to change. If you don't feel like you got a problem, then everything's cool. And because I have an addictive personality, I have to be very careful in a lot of areas of my life personally of what I partake in, because all of a sudden it's just everything that feels good. I just start taking it on.
Right on.
And so I play it safe.
So you get to this place where you realize that my behavior is self-destructive, but it's not who I am. It's just where I've been.
Mm-hmm.
So from here, I can't allow this to define me and keep me in this place. So I see that I have influence. And so instead of using that selfishly and for my, I guess that's redundant, selfishly and for myself, then you take that and you use that to help encourage others or to build others up, where you don't make it about yourself. And so the area of failure where I am, it doesn't, my circumstances does not have to become my conclusion. When I get to this place, when I realize that this is not going to make me better, and if I stay here, it will absolutely kill me, then I can make better decisions, and then I can maybe speak to someone else who I can see or recognize a similar pattern of behavior, and whether they're in a place to receive it now or not, I can speak to it, and not from a place of theory, or I can actually talk to you from a place of experience.
Because I think a lot of times we let failure determine who we are.
Yeah.
We say, man, and the feelings that come with it will literally trap you in them of low self-esteem. I can't be no better. I can't get out of this. And I think it has to be a change in your mind. And even when you fail again, because you may try this thing a bunch of times, you may not conquer it the first time. There's been times when I said, oh, I ain't gonna drink ever again. And I went back. And man, I felt the same feelings of unworthiness and things like that.
Right.
And so just because you're struggling now with it, don't mean that you'll struggle with it forever.
Always.
And I think that's what you got to take from it, is that it's not going to be a struggle forever, but you also have to have enough perseverance to fight through it.
So how do we take, once I've come to this place and I'm not going to allow this to define who I am, how do I now proactively prevent myself from future failure, at least in this area? Or when I get to another place where I feel that it would prevent me from being the best version of myself, if I want to say it that way, how do I use the lessons learned from where I've moved forward before?
I think number one it'd be kind of going back to what I said earlier about you have to remove yourself from situations. When I was really into the party scene, all my friends were there. All my acquaintances were in the same stuff they were doing the same stuff I was. And that's where I found comfort, and I found connection, and the things, that's where my identity was made at, was around those people. So I literally lost pretty much all my friends because all we had in common was that lifestyle.
Right.
And so you have to be very conscious of where you're at, what you're doing, and how you're living your life, because you can very easily go back to that. So I think one thing would be to change the environment that you're partaking in. Because there would be times when I said, oh, I'm just gonna go to the bar and shoot pool. And I would do that for weeks, and I would go and just shoot pool. But then there'd be one night when I'd be like, man, I can have one drink. And then it just, that I went down that path again. So now I have zero tolerance. I can't do it at all because I know where it leads to. So I think one thing would be to remove yourself out of that environment.
So I hear you saying set boundaries for yourself.
And sometimes they have to be very strict boundaries.
So know where my weaknesses are.
Mhm.
And because I know that I'm weak in this particular area, now I have to create boundaries for me. I don't care what Scott's able to do. For me, I'm not able to be in that environment, or I'm not able to participate in those things because it takes me outside of the boundaries that I've set for myself. And now I'm going I'm off path now.
Yes. And I think something else that you would need to do is let other people in close enough to know what your weaknesses are. So when you're with them, if they see you going back to that, they can say, hey man, whoa, what you got going on?
So it sounds like having someone to help keep you accountable.
All the time. Because we think that we're stronger than we are most of the time. We think that we're the strongest person and we can just self-will it and let some hard times in life hit you. You need people around you that will continually hold you accountable and say, didn't you tell me this is what you're doing? As I've told you many times, if you've ever seen me drinking,
Absolutely.
you need to immediately come at me and say, hey, what's going on in your life? Because there's something that's driving that for me to get to that place where I think it's okay to go back.
And on the flip side of that, I've said to you, hey, if you ever see anything that's questionable, I give you permission to come in and find out what's going on
To
here.
do some blocking. And I
was trying to find another way to.
That's the only way really to go at it. I will do some blocking.
You
And-
said blocking, and
And I left some out just for that reason.
I'm with you. I'm with you. I was trying to find a way around it, and you just put blocking in there. I think
Blocking's good. If you
got
know
it.
what you know. And
you got it.
you got it. And I think that everybody needs that kind of person in their life
Yes.
because we fall weak. We're clay, we're flesh, and you can get in a situation that you feel is very appropriate, and it can turn very quickly on you. And all of a sudden you're like, yeah, I think I can do that. And what you do is you start eroding them boundaries smallly,
Wow.
by little, smallly. I think that's a word. I'll make it up if it ain't.
I rock with it.
And one by one, you start tearing these bricks down, and your walls they just get shorter and shorter. And all of a sudden, you're back to where you once
You have
were.
no boundary.
And you have no boundaries. And you're wondering, man, how did I get there? One piece at a time.
Absolutely.
It didn't happen overnight. What you did, you started taking these blocks out and you let your guard down, and nobody knew to really come to you and say, hey, man, what's the problem going on in your life?
And that's the other thing. Say something.
Be willing to say it. Yes.
Be willing to say something like, hey, I'm feeling away.
And you know, there's many times I've called you and said that, man, today ain't my day. I'm feeling this way. I called you one time and said, hey, I was driving by this bar and I wanted to go inside.
Right.
And you said, I've never heard you say that. But because I was willing to say it, it takes the power away from it.
Absolutely.
It's not in my mind anymore, and it's not playing games up there. It's now I vocalize it. Hey, I wanted to go there. And I think that helps a lot. It takes the power away from it. You know, it's just, I think that so many times we play mind games with ourselves and get back into it because there's so many things that we deal with in life. There's so much pressure that we say, oh, we can do one little thing, and all of a sudden it's just back on us.
So, your younger self, dear younger me, I see you. I probably needed that season in my life to get where I am. So I don't see it so much now as regrets, but I do see the failure as opportunity now to grow. I'm not going to allow those seasons to define me and feel like I have to stay there and I won't ever be any better than that season. So It's okay. Identify what the issue is, take accountability for it, find someone that you can confide in and share with that will help hold you accountable. Place some boundaries, recognize the areas where you're weak, and make some boundaries for yourself to keep you from going into those places and grow from there.
And don't beat yourself up.
That's really good.
Don't beat yourself up. We've all failed. We all have shortcomings, and don't let that define who you are. Because for so many times, that's what I've done in my life. I look back, and think, man, you're almost 50 years old. What have you really accomplished? And to be honest, I've accomplished a lot. So many times we minimize the good that we've done, or the for ourselves and for others. We don't see that. All we see is the bad. The bad shines a light. Like, that's who you really are. Look at the good you've done, and be thankful for that.
Absolutely.
Be thankful for what you're doing to change people or help people, or how you've helped yourself. Give yourself some credit sometimes of what you've done.
That's good.
You know. So I guess that's it for today. In closing, we've all experienced some type of failure or regrets in our life. If you haven't, keep living,
Keep living.
because you'll find out it will happen. We hope this has given you some insight on how to deal with failure, whether it be in the past, present, or future in our lives. Just remember, failure is nothing but an opportunity to grow.
Guys, guess that wraps up for today. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Heart of the Matter, where we aim to give you content that matters for all areas of your life. We are your hosts, Marcus and Scott.
Stay strong, and we'll see you next time.
Heart on the matter.